Thank you for checking out another episode of the What is Cycling podcast, and welcome to the first episode of 2023. On today's episode, we have the artist and adventure cyclist Mike Shisler, or as he would like to be known as an Artly. Listen as we discuss van life, more bear encounters, and biking from Alaska to San Diego. Here's part one. Let's go. Well, thank you for joining me today. I am very excited to have you on because you sent me your book. And first off, I want to say it's the first book I've read in 2023. So it was a great book. It's one of the books I'm putting under my goals for the year. I'm going to read 30 books, and yours is the first one I've accomplished. So I'm very happy with that.
That's awesome. No, thank you.
But also, but also it inspired me. I took last year as kind of a down year from cycling. But reading your book has started to shift the gears again in my head and really gotten me to look at Strava and making routes and looking at maps and stuff because I'm like, I've got to get back that adventure aspect of it. I've taken a year off. Now it's time to get back on the horse and go. So I just want you to tell everyone about you, and then we'll get into your book.
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy. First of all, thank you for having me. So happy to share my story and have this conversation. And thank you for reading the book. I mean, that's for an author and an artist, like that's all I can ask for. And so if you read it and enjoyed it, then made my day. So, and also to kind of piggyback on what you said, the one of the things I really love about cycling is that it can take so many different forms. And I mean, it's just a machine for transportation, and you can race it, you can explore with it, you can run errands, you can get a workout. Like all these things are all built into one, that one thing with two wheels and a frame. It's such a simple thing that we can use in so many different ways. And so, like you said, looking at maps and using it to explore and adventure is what I really, that's where I found my true passion on the bike. And then combining that with art is what has actually really inspired me to write this book, to go on these adventures and do all these things. So that's not really a good introduction into who I am or what I do, but I guess to sum it up really briefly is my name is Mike Shisler, and I'm almost 40 years old. I'll be 40 this year, and I love to bike and I love to make art. And putting those two together is what really inspires me to get out there, find new roads, find new places, and explore on two wheels. And so, a bike ride with a sketchbook in my backpack is just the perfect day for me.
Yeah, and that's what I love too about your Instagram and everything and your book too, is that not only is it a story about your trip and cycling and everything, but it's also like I love art. I'm a graphic designer and a web designer and all that, and I am horrible with drawing and painting. So I'm very jealous of your abilities, but I thoroughly enjoy looking at other people's art and their creative abilities. But I love that on your Instagram that you paint and then you hold it up next to what you're painting and just so you can actually see it for the true like vision of what you had, and then on the paper it's so rad, it's so cool.
Yeah, thanks. So to kind of touch on the art thing first, I guess my background was, as a kid, every kid loves to draw. I think, I don't know, I did as a kid, and I've said this to people. And they're like, well, no, I didn't really. I was like, I don't believe that. I think every kid wants to draw and express themselves creatively, and you give a kid a box of crayons, and they're going to be good, and so some of us hold on to that and kind of like take that and carry it through. Some people just don't, and I was one of those people who always wanted to create and be creative. And um, even by the time I was like in middle school, I was like 14 years old, and I was like, all right, what do I want to do the rest of my life? And I kind of made a decision, and it's a strange thing to look back, half a lifetime ago and say that was the day I decided, but I wanted to be an architect. And so I said, I want to be an architect. And so I started like taking different classes and mechanical drawing and all sorts of different things. And I would tailor the rest of my schooling to move me towards architecture because I wanted this combination of creativity and a solid career and all these things. Um, And so that's kind of what led me down this art path was the idea of creating and building and making things with my hands and making things visually. And so I went into architecture. And so I graduated with a degree in architecture. I went into the field for a couple of years. And within a short time, I found that I was losing touch with the creative aspect of what I really fell in love with in the first place. And my days were filled with spreadsheets and schedules and site visits. And it wasn't really the, making things that I really wanted to do. And so on my 30th birthday, I got a sketchbook and I said, all right, I'm going to take these last 30 years and put them over here and look at the next 30 years. And I said, I'm going to sketch once a day, every day for the next 30 years. And it was just this little sketchbook project I wanted to do. And so I got a book and I still have that first sketch from my 30th birthday. And it was at the end of my block. I was living in Baltimore at the time, and there were some old carriage houses, and I knew they were slated to be torn down soon. And I was like, I want to remember them for what they are now. They were built in the 1910s or 1920s, and they're not going to be here forever. And I want to kind of mark this moment and record this bit of history through my hand and through a drawing. So I went down to the end of the block and drew those houses, and they were torn down about a year later. But and then I had this sketchbook, and the next day I just turned the page and I draw whatever inspired me on my way to work. Sometimes it was just a fire hydrant or something. It was like at Halloween I was like, oh, there's a pumpkin on the table. Let me draw that, and it was just whatever I could see. And then I did that for a few years just for myself, keeping this private little journal. And then at one point I shared a photo online, and someone said, oh, that's really cool. I like what you're doing. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll do more, and I'll spend a little more time on it. I'll put more effort into it, and I'll make it for myself and to share. And so that kind of grew and grew, and then it kind of kept blossoming. But I can go into the next phase if you wanna hear about that too.
Yeah, so a few things about what you said, like when you're talking about kids, like having crayons and stuff, and then
Hmm.
they're good. I feel like so you were drawing with crayons, and then as you kept growing, you got progressively better. I, on the other hand, had crayons and stayed the same throughout. So I learned to leave the crayons alone because it wasn't working
Yeah.
for me. But
Right.
yeah, that's awesome because I mean, seeing your work, like the book, it's a great coffee table book. It's a great conversation starter, and just I mean, I want all the listeners to go and buy your book and read it because once again, it's a great story, but the art is just fantastic because
Thanks.
yeah, I mean, I think that's great to look at your life and look back on it because I just turned 30 in October and I'm kind of looking at that too. Like, what do I really want to be doing with the next 30 years of my life? Like, do I really,
Yeah.
I have a great job, I have insurance, the stuff that people have to care about.
Right.
But what do you really want to be doing with the time that you have on this earth? So it's like,
Absolutely.
so you're an inspiration for me just hearing about your story and about this too. It's pretty cool. But yeah, keep going. I want to hear about some more of the phase.
Yeah, so like I said, I was just doing these drawings and kind of keeping a little sketchbook, and I didn't really have a platform to share it. I was just sharing on Instagram, and had maybe a couple hundred followers or something like that. And I would put, at first these sketches were 10 or 15 minutes each, and then maybe they'd stretch to a half hour. And now I'm up to like an hour. Basically, nothing can be done under an hour, but I take a lot of time, and I start with the pencil and the ink and then watercolor, and it's a big process. But so I started that on my 30th birthday, and then let's see, maybe about 4 years later, my wife and I decided that we were both living and working in Baltimore and kind of doing this thing, and we were getting into a rhythm, but also maybe a rut or like a just this kind of grind that we weren't sure we really wanted. And so we decided, actually during a hike in Grand Teton National Park, we went out there for a week long backpacking trip, and it was on that trip that we decided we would quit our jobs or transition into new work, rent out the house, buy a Sprinter van, uh, outfit it, build a bedroom and a kitchen and a bathroom in this van, and then hit the road for a 1 year road trip. And so that was we said if we don't do it now, we're never going to do it. And so we that was the start of our kind of van life journey, and that was I guess 2017, I think, or the fall of 2016. We bought the van by the next spring of 2017. We were on the road, and that was actually our first wedding anniversary. We had a
Oh, that's
date in
awesome.
mind, and we hit the road on our first anniversary. And so during that time, I was like, well, I need to find a new way to make some money. So I opened up an Etsy shop, and I started selling work online, and I started selling prints, and I would print from the van. I had a little studio set up in there, and I could like pull everything out of these hidden boxes and little corners where I'd keep my envelopes and paper and shipping supplies. And it was a really cool opportunity because we were driving this van, just exploring national parks and checking off as many states as we could. And we'd be like, oh well, the leaves are really great in New England. Let's go to New England. Oh, now it's getting cold. Let's go to Key West. And oh, there's Burning Man in Nevada. We got to make it there by August. And so we do all these things, and every day I'd wake up in some new place, and I'd have new inspiration, something to sketch, something to record and explore. And we kept two bikes in the back of the van, and I could just, within minutes, you open the doors, pop on the wheel, and you're rolling. So um, that
That is
was
so awesome. I'm
that
so
was
jealous.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was great. And so that we did that. I mean, just kind of to keep that ball rolling, we've been doing that whole van life thing for almost 6 years now, and we've met an incredible community of people on the road. And we're on our second van. We wrecked one van, and we said, we're not done yet. There's all sorts of stories from the road, but um, you know, it's been a really incredible decade, basically.
So, pretty much to sum it up, you are an adventurer. But so, what made you realize that the van life would kind of scratch that itch more than other solutions? I guess, and other solutions. I don't
Um,
exactly know what that would be, but
Yeah, right, exactly. I mean, at one point, so just as like a little anecdote, we were on the road for 9 months, and we traveled to like some crazy, in the very beginning of this van life journey, we used to fly through states. We'd be driving all night, and like, it just, like our hair was on fire. Looking back, it was way too fast. It was way too much. But at one point, we were in Idaho, and we were leaving. I forget what town it was. But we were trying to make it to Sun Valley to go skiing with some friends the next day. And we had skis and snowboards in the van, and we were doing this whole winter loop kind of thing. And we had a ski pass, and we were like, we could have slept and stayed for the night wherever we were, but we had to make it there by the morning. And so we were kind of driving late at night, and a herd of elk came out and ran across the road right in front of us. And one of them actually hit us, like the first elk, I think, broadsided us, took off our mirror, and within instant, there was one that rolled up over the hood. And those animals are massive. And so um, it basically totaled the van is the short story. We were doing like 60 miles an hour, and this, I don't know, 800, 600 pound animal kind of came crashing through. And it was jarring, and it was upsetting, and it was scary, and it was our home, and we were thousands of miles away from anyone we knew, and we had to figure out what are we going to do. And so we got a hotel room for a few nights, and we kind of like started talking to insurance companies and trying to piece everything together and see what our options were. And when the insurance company said, no, no, sorry, your van is totaled, which was funny. I mean, we were so far out there. We were in Haley, Idaho. They didn't even send anyone out. It was like they were like, it's too far for our representative to drive. We're just gonna like talk to the tow truck driver, take his best advice, and total your van. And
that's when you know
so
you're
we
out there.
Yeah, right, right. And it felt like we were so alone. I mean, like it's like right next to a resort town, and it's like there's friendly people, but in the big scheme of things, I'm from the East Coast, she was from Texas, and all that kind of stuff. And so but we looked at our situation, and we said, what are we going to do? We could take this insurance money, and we could go to Europe for a while, and we could just rent Airbnbs, and like this money can do so many more things. But we decided to kind of double down, and we bought another van. Someone had actually reached out on Instagram, and they said, hey, we heard you might be looking for a van. There was one that just came up for sale in Billings, Montana. There's a Mercedes dealer there, and someone had ordered this van like 9 months ago, and it was a 9 month waiting period to get your van in. You know, they were in such high demand that this guy had ordered a van, and then it finally arrived on the lot, and he backed out. He's like, I don't want it anymore. So there was this like brand new Sprinter van sitting on the lot, and it was like first one to get there gets it. And so we drove through the night in a rental car to Billings, Montana, and walked into the dealership like 15 minutes before someone else, and we put our name down for the new van. And and then we went back to the East Coast. We kind of packed everything in there, drove whatever it was back to Pennsylvania to my childhood driveway, and started rebuilding the van there. But so I guess the question was like, if it wasn't van life, what would it be? We kind of have continually gone for van life. That was the answer for us.
Yeah, and that's that's one thing that my wife and I kind of go back and forth on because we too like to like the national parks and just seek adventure, and we want to be outside, we want to be exploring, we want to be out in the wild pretty much.
Yeah,
And the van seems to be the best option, but it comes with the downsides, kind of like what you're saying. Like from some of the reading I've done, like insurance can get kind of iffy with vans because it's your house, but it's also an automobile, but the insurance companies don't exactly see it that way. And downsizing, like we have 3 dogs. And
right.
so 2 adults and 3 dogs in a van sounds fun, but I'm
Gets a
sure it
big
wouldn't
one.
be as
Yeah,
much
right.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I mean, we've seen so many different things on the road. There's definitely a way to do it. I mean, we've seen. I'm sure there's been 2 people and 3 dogs out there. We've met a family of 7 or a family of 8. Like 5 kids and 2 parents, and they're in a school bus. They've got a full length
oh, I was
school
about to
lease.
ask. Yeah.
Right. But if you really want to make it work, there's a way to do it.
Yeah, there's a solution.
Yeah.
But so when you went to the East Coast to fill your van, what did the process look like for downsizing to fit everything into the van? Like, how did you determine what was a necessity and like a nice to have?
It was for my wife. It was really hard. The very first time we went from our house, we had a row home in Baltimore. It wasn't even that big. It was 11 feet wide and 40 feet long, and but the whole second bedroom was her closet, and so she had to take this whole thing and jam it down into a few packing cubes and all this kind of stuff. And so it was, but also at the same time, it's very clarifying, and you kind of find what you find most important. And I remember like the very first time I packed, I was like, you know what, I only really do need one pair of pants, and I spent a lot of time, and I picked the perfect pair of pants, and I picked like one flannel button-up shirt, and I was like, this is the one. It was really quality, and I was like, this is gonna get me there. And I wore it for a year and a half, um, and wool fabrics. I can't recommend enough wool, like t-shirts and undergarments and all that kind of stuff. They don't smell, and you can really wear them for a few days in a row. And then um, it was what's most important to you. So the cool thing about, we built the van ourselves, and so designing it, you get to say what is most important to me. And for us, it was bikes. And so we literally started the van build with bikes in mind. So you put them in what we call the garage, which is
Under the bed.
under the bed. Yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah,
sometimes
nice.
sometimes we're laying in bed, we're like, oh, where's that thing? And I'm like, I think it's downstairs. And that's literally just like under the bed. But the garage, or whatever you want to call it. I the Designing the van, I put the bikes in there first, and I say, all right, well, I take off the front wheel and I do this fork mount, and then I measure. And I'm like, all right, well, I've got 37 and a half inches to work with, whatever the height was to the top of the seat, which I dropped the seat post and dropped that down. And then you're like, okay, now I've got the height of the bed, and then you kind of work out from there, and like that's the first step. So if kiteboarding is the most important thing to you, you're going to put your board in there, you're going to put your kite and your whole kit, and see how that all works. And so for me, it was that, and then I would also make room for a printer, because I was printing all these art orders from the road. So I was like, all right, I need a box that fits these dimensions, and how can we make that work? So um, and the minimalism thing is, it just becomes natural after a while. You just kind of reevaluate, and you only take what's important or what you really need. And then also looking back, I mean, our very first van was, if you're familiar with these vans, the Mercedes, they come in about three lengths, and they're on one of two wheel chassis. The one is a 170 wheelbase, the other is a 144. Our first one was a 170, and we had it jam packed, so much stuff. And then when we got in that accident, we unloaded everything we had into like a little storage unit. We rented this thing right where we were, and I looked at everything. And I was like, this is way too much stuff. What are we doing carrying all these things? And I was like, I didn't even know we had this whatever, this projector or something. I was like, all right, this is too much stuff. So our second van was smaller, and we even consolidated more, and we kind of reprioritized again. And that's what it takes. You just kind of go through it again and again, and even now, just yesterday, I got some new Christmas presents, and I was like, all right, well, this is in, this is out, this is in, this is out. It's kind of really refreshing.
Yeah, I think that to an adventurer, living the minimalistic lifestyle and actually like so my wife and I read this book about like fire, like retiring early, being financially independent. Um you make a list about the things that are most important to you, like the top 10, and then you only do things that pertain to those top 10. And if it like you don't buy anything that doesn't pertain to those top 10, like you use your money to solely focus on that. And we've downsized a lot, obviously, from like moving out west and coming back home and stuff like that. So now, I mean, to me, I still think we have way too much stuff, but compared to people, like we hardly have anything. But I
Right.
want all of our stuff to fit on the cargo carrier on top of our car.
There you go.
But that's not going to happen.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's definitely freeing to know that like at any given point, we could just pack up and go move wherever, and it would be no serious haul on us to like downsize or anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you live that way for a while, and then it starts to expand again, because I certainly can't say that I'm still in that one little van footprint. I mean, life has changed over the last few months, over the last few years, and now we're kind of expanding. I'm actually in a shipping container right now that is holding a lot of our stuff on a piece of property that we bought. But this shipping container is also my art studio. I'm talking to you from here, and it does a lot of stuff for us. So it's still very minimal, but it has expanded because our needs have changed a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Like I miss our two-car garage that we used to have and the
Yeah,
workshop, but other than
right.
that, it's okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But so let's start to get into your trip because for one, your trip is amazing, but for two, your encounters and not just human encounters, but all other encounters that we'll get into were
Sure.
wild as well. So why don't you tell everyone about your trip?
Yeah. So let me kind of, I'll paint the big picture because we got time. So use whatever you want of this. But um, so I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I always had a desire to see the country. I wrote in the book, there was a quote that said, "Go west, young man." I don't know who said that or what it was about, but I kind of took that as scripture. As a young kid, I was like, "Oh, the West Coast is just everything I want," and I'd never been there before. And even not knowing anything about it, I just grew up in Pennsylvania, and I felt like something was drawing me westward. And it was adventure, and it was this kind of seeking mentality. And so as a kid, I wanted to bike across the country. That was a goal. That was like a dream that I always wanted to do. And I actually I started biking more and more in college. I was living in Philadelphia, and I used a bike as my daily transportation. And I really fell in love with it so much that I even like wrote my architecture thesis around bicycles. And I was like, this is a machine, and it's so perfectly ergonomic, and it's designed for the human, and it's like there's nothing else like it. And I finished my college degree, and I had one more summer. I had like one more summer vacation, and I said, this is my last chance to do this before I enter the working world. And so the summer I graduated from college, I was going to bike from Pennsylvania to San Francisco, and it was like I've got it all mapped out. But this was before smartphones. So I had a flip phone and paper maps, and I was like, that's all I need. and I had like a jar of peanut butter and like this like really dumb wanderlust kind of thing, and I was like, I'm gonna make it. And I went 3 days on the road, and it was
Just
a
on
heat
peanut butter.
wave, and pushed, I pushed myself too hard. I was dizzy. And looking back, I was like, I was only drinking water. I should have had more electrolytes and more salts, and my imbalances were all off. And I quit. I quit like 3 days into this like lifelong thing, and I had finally had the chance, and I quit somewhere in Virginia, and I was so dejected, and I went back home, and everyone I'd talked to, they were like, "Oh, you're back already?" I was like, "No, just shut up. We're not going to talk about it." I quit, and so that was 2007, and I was very disappointed, but I said, I guess that wasn't for me. And so I went. That was 2007, and then what uh, 15 years later or something, I found myself in 2020. The pandemic had just kind of come through and shut everything down, and I said, you know what? Maybe this is a new opportunity for me. Maybe this is a chance to do that thing I've always wanted to do. And so in the spring of 2020, I guess in May and June of 2020, I biked from New Jersey to California, and I finally did this thing that I always wanted to do. And it was a dream come true. And I did it in 30 days, and I was like really flying through, and I paint and I sketched every day, and it was just this magical experience. And so that was 2020, and then I said, all right, I'll check that off the list. Complete, done. Move on with my life. Whatever comes next is it's gonna be great. But um, about a year later, I kind of got this itch, and I was like, you know what? I think I want to do something else. I want to do something more and do it again. And this thing that I fell in love with so much, I was like, why only do it once? If I can do it again, I'm gonna do it again. And so now I'm going to get into almost the Alaska thing. So I looked at the map, and I said I did 3,000 miles from New Jersey to California, and it was a really cool distance. It took me a month. It was like this. It wasn't a 6 month expedition, and it wasn't just a 1 week trip. It was like filled this like really good sweet spot, I felt. And so I was like, maybe what else is 3,000 miles? And at that time, I was in Southern California, and I looked at the map, and I was like, what else is 3,000 miles? And I literally just drew like a line from Southern California and drew this radius. And I was like, oh, look at this. Anchorage, Alaska to San Diego is 3,000 miles. And I was like, I was really blown away by that. I thought it was so much farther, but I was like, that might be the ticket. That's the spot I'm going to do. And I've never been to Alaska. That'll be my 50th state. And I love the idea of it. And so I was like, okay, there you go, done. It's set. Alaska to or Anchorage to San Diego, it'll be perfect. And then I started looking at the map of Alaska, and I started planning it out. And I said, well, if I start in Anchorage, I'm only going to see like 10% of the state. I want to see more. I want to see what if I go to Alaska and I only get to see this little part of it. So let me go to Fairbanks. Fairbanks sounds like a good spot to start, and I can fly right into there's an airport there. I'll go to Fairbanks and then to San Diego. And I said, well, what really has a nice ring to it is the Arctic Circle, because that's only another 100 or 200 miles above Fairbanks. So I was like, okay, Arctic Circle to San Diego. And then I was like, well, now I'm like in for the whole thing. So I'll go all the way to the northern tip of Alaska, or at least where the farthest northern road goes, and that is a town called Prudhoe Bay, or a town called Dead Horse. And I'll ride from Dead Horse to San Diego. And so that was the start of this whole adventure. And now that 3,000 miles had stretched to 4,000 miles, which I was like, I'm sure I can do it. I'm sure that won't make a difference. I found out later it does. That those 1,000 miles was like the tipping point of what I could mentally handle, not physically. Physically, I'm sure I could bike around the world. I'm sure, if you really, you know, decapitate your emotions from the whole thing, your body can go on for a very long way. But so to get back to the book, in the let's see, we are now in 23. In June of 2022, I flew to the town of Deadhorse. I flew to the town of Prudhoe Bay and started this epic adventure of biking from Alaska to California. And
So that's when you
I
know
had,
you're mad,
yeah,
because when you get an idea, like that's one thing I love about adventure cyclists and ultra endurance people and stuff. is that they're never satisfied. It's like, oh, I'm just going to bike 3,000 miles. It's like, well, if I start here, then I can do that. We're like, actually, if I start here, and it just keeps growing and growing. And
Absolutely,
that's,
yeah.
it's terrifying when you meet someone like that and they're like, let's go ride. And you're like, okay. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, and I love the idea of I've done the east to west coast of the United States, and literally on that kind of ride, I put my back wheel in the Atlantic and my front wheel in the Pacific, and like there's nowhere else to go. You've stretched the entire thing from coast to coast. And this one, I went from the very farthest northern point to the Mexican border. And if I spoke better Spanish, I might have kept going, but I don't. So I stopped right there at the southern border. But yeah, it's maybe there's something wrong with us adventure cycling people, or what. But it's just there's a certain, I wrote about it in the book, and there's a certain magic that really happens in the middle of a trip. And so I've kind of made a case for a 3-day trip is almost as rewarding as a 30-day trip. And so the first day, when you wake up in your bed and you kind of start from a car or whatever, that first day is not quite the adventure and the experience that you're looking for. But that middle day, when you wake up in a tent, you ride all day and you sleep in a tent, that's the perfect spot. And then, on your third day, you can be done. You ride back home and or whatever, and you get a hot shower and a good meal. But that middle day where you're disconnected from the kind of the normal life and the routines, that's the magic. And what I got to do was do that for 30 days or 40 days in a row. And it's just so rewarding, and it's so simplifying. And it probably goes back to that whole minimalism thing we were talking about, where everything you have is on your bike, and that's the absolute minimum you can carry. And so, looking at what I pack on my bike is kind of the essence of life, and that's like all I really need to sustain me. Um,
So did your
and so,
setup change as you went? Like, did you, because when I first went bike packing, I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to set it up. And then I started the trip and I was like, okay, this is horrible. Like, I need to have this stuff here and this stuff here. Did yours change, or did you, because it sounds like you've done this before quite a few times and like all the way across the country. So that counts. So it's
right.
like,
I really look at the packing experience as part of the trip, and it takes me weeks to really zero everything in on where it gets packed and how it gets packed. And you know, it's funny because sometimes I'll get out a scale and I'll weigh like the gram difference between two different pairs of pants, or are these socks better than these ones? And then other times I end up carrying like something super heavy, like a big battery pack or something. Um, but the packing is it didn't change too much from the start. It At the very start of the ride. So Alaska is basically there's a continental divide in North America. There's the one that most of us know about that goes through the Rockies, and it separates the water that flows to the Pacific and the water that flows to the Gulf or to the Atlantic. And that continental divide goes through New Mexico and Colorado and up through the Rockies. And then there's also another continental divide in the very northern tip of Alaska that separates the north from the south. And so all water flowing on this side, on the southern side of Alaska, flows, towards the equator or whatever that would be. But then on the north slope of Alaska, there is, everything flows up towards the Arctic Ocean. And so starting on the northern side of that north slope, is frigid. It's so cold, and I was there in June. I specifically picked like one of the warmest months, or at least the longest daylight periods and all this kind of stuff. So, but it was still at no matter what I did, it was 22 degrees the day I started. So I started with like a full, Arctic survival kind of setup, and I had so many layers on, and I had the heaviest sleeping bag I could get, and my water was still freezing. All my water bottles were slush within a few hours, and all that kind of stuff. And so,
how far did you travel on that first day? Because that's one question that I had after reading your book. Is like, I just want to know total time and total distance on that first day. Because you said you biked for what? It was
yeah,
16 hours
yeah, yeah, that
or
first
18
day
hours or
was
something.
was pretty insane. So I started, let's say I started at like 4 or 5 in the morning. Um, but there's endless daylight up there. Honestly, in June the sun never goes down, so it doesn't like it kind of messes with your head, and you wake up in a hotel room and you're like, well, I don't know what time it is. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter because the sun's not going to set. And so I started at like 5 in the morning, and I really did not want to camp on the north side of Adigan Pass. So there's this big mountain range, the Brooks Mountain Range, and I really wanted to get up over that pass. That was my main goal. And if I had to camp on the north side of it, I was prepared. It wasn't going to be pleasant. The ground was frozen. It would have been pretty awful, but I could have survived. I could have made it. But anyway, so I said I want to make it up and over this pass. So it ended up being 175 miles that first day on like a fully loaded bike. The
Holy
whole the whole
cow.
thing was it was insane. But again, like I you have to remember, like I had so much time. I knew I had 24 hours to play with, and if I could stay awake, I could keep going. Um,
And you're amped up and like it's the first day, all the excitement and stuff.
yeah, exactly. I'm so fresh and everything's good. And then at a certain point, I was like, my ego kind of kicks in. I was like, oh, could I do 200 miles in a day? I've never done it before. This is my chance. Maybe I can do 200 in a day, or maybe I can ride for 24 hours straight. And looking back, I was like, that's a really dumb way to start a 4,000-mile bike ride because you're gonna, that you need to recover. The next day, I got to do it again and again and again. Uh, so I got finally at around midnight. Let's say I started at 5 a.m. By midnight of that day, I finally got up over the pass, and it was so creepy and eerie, and it was such a bizarre moment. But I got up over the pass, and then coming down the next side, I was like, oh, there's finally going to be like wildflowers and birds and animals and green things, and it started to. And so like the northern side was a tundra, and it was just almost a wasteland. And then the trees started to appear, and there was like a stream that wasn't frozen, and all these types of things started to appear. And so coming down that south side of Adigan Pass, I was started to like get so sleepy, and I was like almost falling asleep on the bike, and I was like, this is now it's getting dangerous. And I was like, all right, I got to pull over. So about 175 miles later, I pulled over, found kind of the first flat spot I could, pitched my tent, and just fell right asleep, and it was pretty amazing. But
So when with your water freezing, how did you drink? Like how did you stay hydrated through that first day?
so I started with hot water bottle. I mean, when I filled my water bottles, everything was hot. I filled it with hot water from the hotel, and I just have like these, normal Camelback water. There's one behind me actually, and it has some thin wall of insulation, but it froze, and so it
Nothing
would be
for 22
slushy.
degree weather.
Yeah, right. And so I would just kind of like squeeze it, kind of mush it up, and make the ice kind of break up a little bit. But I probably didn't drink enough that day. I didn't sweat much either. But or if I had to, I think I put maybe one in my jacket and kind of try to thaw it out that way. Um,
Okay,
yeah,
that makes
yeah.
sense.
Because I was also trying to keep, I had to keep my batteries warm on my phone and GoPro and all that kind of stuff. I didn't want them getting too cold and draining them that way either. So
Oh, I didn't even think about the technology aspect.
yeah,
Cause
yeah,
yeah, I mean that when it gets too hot and too cold, they don't behave properly,
exactly.
and the battery will die faster. So,
Hmm.
wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
You're a brave man.
I don't know if it's bravery or stupidity, one or the other, but
I
the
call it cool.
yeah. The one of the cool things about this little town, this Dead Horse, Alaska, is it's really just nothing but an oil field, and it's like a staging area for the oil fields and the pipeline, and it's all oil workers and machinery and construction, and it's not meant for tourists at all. Like there's no public buildings. There's like one little store that I could go to and buy something, but everything else is owned by the oil companies, owned by the gas companies. But there's a steady stream of people and other adventurers who come there just to check it off the list. And it's really cool that while I was there, I met guys on motorcycles who had ridden up from Argentina or ridden from Florida, and they were like finally getting there and checking it off their list. I met some other cyclists doing the exact same thing. There was a story of a guy who was walking from Argentina to Alaska, and they were like, "Yeah, you're probably gonna see him. He's on his way. We expect him this week or something." I never did see him, but like, he was like walking and just pulling a trailer, and he'd been on the road for, I don't know, years, 3 or 4 years or something like that.
Ages, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. So, and you do a good job in your book. I'm not an author or a writer, I'm horrible. But from reading your book, I think you do a good job of setting up the stage to getting to Alaska. So, with the people that you had interacted with, like on the airplanes and stuff, the people that worked on the pipeline and everything, did they fly in every day or did they fly in for like the week and then leave?
They would probably fly in for the week or 10 days or something like that, maybe even a couple weeks. But yeah, the guys fly in. It's probably 95% men. On the flight in, I did sit next to a woman, and we just chatted really briefly. And she was actually on her way to do caribou studies or count reindeer or something like that, and more of like a
That's cool.
naturalist kind of, yeah, aspect of it. But the most of them were all oil workers and or gas line pipeline kind of things. And you could tell they fly in for a week or 2 weeks, and it's just this grind for them. But and then I was certainly the oddball. I was the oddity. In the book, I kind of described these guys in their Carhartts and their boots and their cigarettes and their flannel and all that kind of stuff, and I was in sweatpants and like some lycra, and I forget what shoes I was wearing, like water shoes, like because I didn't want to wear my bike shoes, and sandals were obviously too cold, so I had like these in between shoes I was wearing, and I had a fanny pack on and all that kind of stuff. So I definitely stood out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny to read like about your trip there and like the people change every plane ride you get on. But did the planes get smaller and smaller and smaller every one you got on?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
I left from San Diego. It was San Diego to Seattle, and that's like a normal flight. I've done that flight before. You know what to expect. And then flying to Anchorage, you're like, okay, well now we've got like this Alaska crowd, and they kind of are not amused by things in quite the same way. And it's like the surfer dudes from California, they're long gone. And then the flight from Anchorage to Dead Horse was like this really small, not really small, but I mean it was, there were two seats on one side, one on the other, and it's just a very kind of a small jet. And it makes this flight once a day. That's it. And literally, when I got off the plane, the woman at the end of the jetway said, "Welcome to work." And I don't know why she said it. Like she could have said, "Hi, welcome to whatever," but she said, "Welcome to work." And I just gave her a smile because I'm not here for work. I'm here for play. I'm here for fun. And no one else goes there for that. But crazy people like me.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Mm.
So I want to talk about the cover of your book.
Yeah.
So for everyone, the thing I'm learning about Beats, Bears, and Battlestar Galactica is that cyclist, it's like the cyclist's worst enemy besides cars and bad drivers seem to be bears. Like from let's see, I think I've had 3 or 4 people discuss bear encounters on their bike rides, like bike packing or gravel riding and stuff. And you're adding to that
Yeah.
list now. So I want to hear about all the bear encounters.
Yeah, yeah. So the Bears were something I was ready for. I was expecting them. I was kind of prepared, or as best you can be. And then at a certain point, I do all this research, and I don't know if you've ever like researched rattlesnake bites, but I've done some research on that because I now live in rattlesnake territory, and I come away with this feeling like there's nothing you can do. Like there's no real good answer for a rattlesnake bite, and I kind of felt the same thing about bears. They were like, you can take precautions, don't be stupid, and then after that, like there's not much you can do. So um, I assumed I would see them, and I just hoped they would be far enough away and kind of not in my way or on my route or whatever. But I was carrying bear spray, and so if some of your listeners don't know what bear spray is, it's a canister, about 8 or 10 ounces of a compressed gas and capsaicin spray. So it's like a pepper spray for people, but just supersized, and it throws out this like 30 or 40 foot cloud of pepper spray. And some people say it works, some people say it doesn't. even in the research they were like, only works if the wind is blowing in the right direction. And I was like, oh great, yeah,
Yeah.
like if I'll spray it and it'll blow right back in my face or something. So I had a can of pepper spray. I kept
It would just
all
add flavor for you for the bear.
exactly right,
Yeah.
spicy human tonight.
Yeah.
um, I kept all my food in a bear canister, a bear proof container. And then after that, I was like, I'll just try to play it smart and be safe. Um, so the one of the first bears that I saw was either in Alaska or in the Yukon, and I can't. Looking back, it's hard to remember the between the two because like there's an international border, but the the landscape doesn't really change too much. It's kind of it's just same mountains, same topography. Um,
Trees, mountains, and wildlife.
yeah, right. But there was this one morning, and I started. I got a good early start on the day, and it was probably 5 a.m. And I was riding down this road, and I was pedaling along, and then I just decided to coast. Just you can't pedal all day. I just coasted for a moment, and my freewheel kicked in, and it had that ratchet sound. And off to the shoulder was a bear that I did not see, and he didn't see me. If I had kept pedaling, I probably would have gone silently through there, and none of us would have ever known we were there. But as soon as my freewheel kicked in, I was right next to this bear, and he was like 6 or 8 feet off the shoulder of the road, and he stood straight up, and I didn't even know what to do, and I looked back, and like this thing is standing, it stood straight up, and it jumped almost like a house cat. Like if you scare a house cat, they go straight up, and it did that, and it like was ready to charge or do whatever. And luckily, I just had enough speed, and I started pedaling again, and I got out of there. Um, so like these bear encounters, I wish there were like, you know, I'm glad there aren't better stories, but really it was like I saw this bear on the side of the road, and then there was another story where I was biking down the road, and I didn't see many cars out there, but every once in a while, there's some traffic, and there's mostly tourists also doing the other things I'm doing and checking out Alaska, and the weird thing about Alaska is there's only a handful of real major roads. I've read about a woman, another cyclist, who she's made it her goal to bike every road in Alaska, and it's actually
Oh, Lil
doable.
Wilcox.
Yeah, I think that's her,
Yeah.
and it's doable because there are only a dozen major roads, and so you can kind of piece them all together. But so anyway, car coming the other direction, they slowed down and they rolled down the window. They go, "Hey, watch out! There's a bear up ahead." And I was like, oh, okay, thanks for the tip. Like, not much I can do. I'm going to keep going. And then a second car came, and they were like, it's a big one. Watch out. There's a bear up ahead. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll take it a little more seriously now. And the third person comes by, and they say, that's a big one. Watch out. It's just past the bridge. It's on the shoulder. And I was like, okay, fine. So now I got to come up with a plan. And so I was like, I don't want to. One of the biggest things I was afraid of was a bear to see me and want to chase, and want to track me down because I don't think I can outbike a bear. I don't want to try. I don't even want to get in that
Yeah.
situation. And so I had like, all right, well, I need a plan. I need to come up with some idea of what to do. I mean, waiting is an option. I could wait a day, or I could wait 6 hours, or whatever it takes. Maybe I could hitchhike. I could try to throw my bike into a car or a truck or something. But uh, I there were situations where I would had to put my bike into a truck, and it's heavy, it's awkward, it's big, it gets scratched, it's all sorts of stuff. So I had an idea. I was like, how about the next car that comes along going in my direction? I flagged them down, and I asked them to pull over, and they did. And I said, here, I got an idea. There's a bear up ahead. Do you mind doing me a favor? And I was like, do you mind driving slowly, 10 miles an hour, and I'm going to bike in the left-hand lane, and I'm going to use your car as a buffer between me and the bear. And then once we're clear of the bear, thank you, I really appreciate your help, and I'll just go on. And so they agreed, and so that's exactly what we did. And so I said, I've been told the bear is just across the bridge. It was just like a little stream crossing, and then there was a bridge and the bear. And so at 10 miles an hour, we kind of just crept along, and the bear was there, and it was right off the side of the road. There were maybe two of them actually, and it worked. So you got to be creative, and it feels like you're out there alone a lot of the time, but you're often not. I have several other stories in the book about people wanting to help, people offering things, and such kind and generous people out there are looking out for you, even though you might not know it or see them or know them. Especially in wild places, there are really great people. And then you kind of see that mentality from Alaska, and then you get down into San Francisco or the Bay Area, and it's not there anymore. But that's fine. That's just the way people
Yeah.
are. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, especially when you get down to the lower 48, but